The sign of a truly great baseball show is the ability to make playing general manager with the Milwaukee Brewers and the Miami Marlins and the Orioles signing a pitcher to a 1 year deal the most interesting show that you have ever seen. Welcome to the Wednesday, December 18th edition here of the Just Baseball Show. That's Aram Layton. I'm Peter Apple, and it is all brought to you by BetMGM, the king of sportsbooks. Remember, folks, even in the offseason, use promo code JustBaseball on BetMGM for up to $1,500 back in bonus bets if your first bet loses. Also, just a quick reminder, if you've been enjoying all the shows during this offseason, the best way to support is just hitting the like button, hitting the subscribe button on YouTube, filling up the comment section with all of your great baseball takes. And if you're listening on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you listen, rating 5 stars, leaving a written review is greatly, greatly appreciated. Arm, you ready for the banger of this episode? I'm ready.
Yeah, well, I was gonna say this is a fun challenge. I think there's some unique wrinkles to talk about, but I mean, we're talking about the Marlins and the historically boring Brewers when it comes to playing GM, and then yeah, a 35-year-old who just signed a 1 year deal. It seems like the Orioles love to just give out those 1 year, $13 million deals now the last couple of years for a team that doesn't usually throw out a ton of money. It was Craig Kimbrell last year, and this year it's Tomoyuki Sugano.
Let's talk about him. So the Orioles are signing Japanese right-hander Tomoyuki Sugano to a 1 year, $13 million deal. Little background, the 35-year-old has a 1.67 ERA across 156 innings in the MPB last year, over 12 seasons in the MPB, 1,857 innings. That's about 155 per season, pitched to a 2.43 ERA, but just 1,585 strikeouts. Not a strikeout artist,
No.
but has been incredible in run prevention. But he is 35. And I think when this came across the ticker, it's somewhat of an interesting move. It's a fun dive on a pitcher that we might not know a lot about. But you're the Baltimore Orioles. I don't want to have to do deep dives on the guys that you guys bring into the rotation. That's not what I feel the Orioles should be doing right now. Am I wrong on that?
Yeah, I would probably aim a little bit higher. I just think like we'll see what he looks like when he comes over. I think the floor is at least higher to where he can be a solid depth arm. But when I was doing the dive this year into these international free agents, obviously Roki Sasaki was predominantly where most of my time was spent. But like last year, we had several arms. Like I was really enamored with Imanaga, and that was a whole process where I'm like, okay, this guy. Everyone's talking Yamamoto, but Imanaga is a dog too. Like I didn't really have that in this process. I was pretty surprised to see him get 13 million. And it's only a 1 year deal, so it's fine. But in terms of like the money that they're trying to spend this season, I just don't know if that's where I would allocate it. It's not, again, not a bad signing by any means, but I have some serious concerns on how the fastball is going to perform over here. He averages 92 miles per hour with it, but the shape is not great. So I could see it just being a fastball that gets hit really hard. His slider is gross, and that's going to be his best pitch. And I think the fact that he does not walk anybody is also very endearing. It's a fastball, slider, cutter, splitter, curveball arsenal. He'll mix in a sinker. I think he should lean into that more. I'm curious if he will, because I think for him to have success at the major league level, it will be getting ground balls and weak contact, as you mentioned, doesn't strike out a lot of guys. But yeah, I just don't know if this would be the priority for me, if I'm trying to address the rotation, a guy that is going to make that leap at 35, who doesn't really have a good fastball, and is going to really have to massage his way through lineups with the assortment of secondaries. But again, it is encouraging at least that he limits the long ball, he gets a lot of contact on the ground, and he walks nobody. So at the very least, you have a good depth arm. But at 13 million a year, I think I would have probably liked to aim a little bit higher.
Are you worried about the workload concerns at all? He is 35 years old. He's coming over from a league like the MPB where they're only really pitching once a week, right? It's more of a 6, 7 man rotation at times. Again, just pitching once per week instead of every fifth day. He's not a crazy innings eater, right? Averaging 155 innings over his 12 seasons, coming off a year of 156. But at 35 years old, coming into a new league, with a rotation that already has Trevor Rogers in it, where Mike Elias even came out and said that he ran out of gas at the end. That's
Yeah.
not something we like to see. Grayson Rodriguez has been now hurt in each of the last two seasons. Of course, they still have Eflin and they still have Dean Kramer. But Orioles fans looking at their lineup, looking at this surplus of prospects on the offensive side, have to be saying this just cannot be enough. This cannot be enough. But the workload concerns, do you have any?
A little bit for sure. I mean, he hasn't thrown a ton of innings since really 2018 when he threw 202. And also, like, yeah, I know the ERA numbers are good, but at the same time, like, look at the league average ERA numbers. It's like this is where we need like an ERA plus
Yeah.
for NPB and KBO so that we're comparing evenly. But he is coming off a year where he did throw 156, which was the most he's thrown since that 2018 season. So that helps a little bit, and it was one of his best years statistically. I think they're kind of going into this season expecting him to just be needed for 150. So I think that part of it's is fine. But I think you're what on the higher end, hoping that he looks something like Dean Kramer looked like last year, which is a 4.1 ERA and around 130 to 150 innings. Like I agree with you. Like, why do you want another guy like
Yeah.
that when you could aim a little bit higher? But again, I'm not going to knock it totally because at least they added another arm to the fold. But it's not like he's cheap. If it was a 1 year, $5 million deal, oh, I get it. He's depth, it's solid. See what he can do. A little bit of upside there just because the unknown. But at 13, I, I get. I would have rather paid a little bit more over multiple years too. Even like I'd rather sign somebody to a 3 year, $60 million deal. I know that's way more money, but even like a 2 year, 40, something like that. Like 13 is still a lot of money for a guy that could end up kind of being squeezed out of the rotation if that fastball doesn't perform. And like just for reference, I mean, he had a 4.4% swinging strike rate on the fastball this past year. And opponents, I know like bat to ball wise are really solid out there, but opponents ran an in zone contact rate of 90% against the
Ugh,
fastball.
that's
Like,
really bad. Wait a
yeah,
minute. Sometimes gloss over the numbers. That's really bad.
it's bad. They didn't crush it from a production standpoint, but if you're not getting whiffs on the heater, like stateside, he's going to lose some vert on that fastball naturally as well. Guys hit the ball harder. It could get knocked around pretty good. So that's my only concern. But I might be wrong. He might just be able to pick apart lineups and just really be able to locate. There's going to be a lot of emphasis on being able to needing to locate. Slider helps. And we saw his velo tick up in shorter spurts, which was nice. Like that fastball, I think last appearance of the year, he went 2 innings out of the pen, and he sat 93 to 94. So that would help. So at least you can kind of be this maybe swingman type. But again, at 13 million, you kind of want him grabbing a rotation spot. So that's what the expectation is, and we'll see how it goes. But I will say, despite the low whiff, he does seem to have a knack for limiting damage. I mean, the opponents had like a 560 OPS against him last year, so it's hard to knock that.
So we'll see. And later on in this episode, maybe we'll be talking about a starting pitcher getting traded to the Orioles. Now, if Mike Elias gets his head out of his butt and actually does it, that remains to be seen, but we will at least talk about it. So, again, on this episode, playing general manager for the Milwaukee Brewers and the Miami Marlins. But before that, our first break. All right, Aram, time to hop in the lab for the Milwaukee Brewers. Let's talk about some of their off-season moves. And just a reminder, if you're coming in here for the first time, this isn't MLB The Show. This is playing general manager for these teams, operating under the historical data that they've given us and the assumptions of what they're going to do this season. So no, we aren't signing Juan Soto. We aren't doing any of these things for the Milwaukee Brewers. Of course, Soto is signed, but that was a stupid comparison. But you understand where I'm coming from, that we're operating under what the Brewers are typically doing, even though we think that this team could do a lot more to win this division because the National League Central is so wide open this year. Let's talk about some of their moves already. They lost Willy Adames in free agency, and they traded Devin Williams to the Yankees in exchange for left-handed pitcher Nestor Cortez Jr. and second base prospect Caleb Durbin. I was listening to you guys on the show, that Sunday bonus episode, and I thought you guys broke it down exactly how I would have. I thought that the Yankees gave up a little bit too much. I even made a TikTok about how I saw all of Yankees Twitter calling this a fleece. When I said I didn't love it on Twitter, I have tons of Yankee fans not understanding, basically saying that I don't know what I'm talking about. Giving up Nestor is a lot. Giving up Durbin is a lot for 1 year of a closer. Now, he's a great closer, but he's got 2 innings in the playoffs and his ERA is at 23. Now, do we expect that to continue? I don't know, but that's all the data that we have. But in the regular season, he's been great. We'll see what happens there. But again, if you want to hear a better breakdown, a more extensive breakdown, go check out that Sunday episode. Unless you have anything to add that you weren't able to say in that one.
No, I mean, it was a lot. I think it's hard to get upset with the Yankees. If you're a Yankees fan, obviously you should be excited. Just get an arm with a career sub 2 ERA. But
Yeah.
yeah, I think if you're looking at the value, I think the Brewers came away better given what they're able to do and what they needed. They needed more starting pitching. I still think they need more starting pitching, which we're going to talk about. And you know that they're going to reload that bullpen. That it already is still loaded, and they can just shift up more options with Mizorowski, which, like we talked about, Yoho on the way, and then I mean their arms that they already have there, which we'll go over, are fantastic as is. So I mean, it was a perfect time to cash in and I think address another need, which was in that rotation, and then also getting so much needed depth on the bench as well,
Yeah, I think the Yankee camp was saying, well, we don't need Nestor Cortez Jr.
which
So
is
it's easy to
true.
trade one of the starters. But the Brewers don't need Devin Williams either. So
Yeah.
that's kind of a moot point there. Cancels each other out. But the Brewers are doing Brewers things. They're operating within the margins. And I think they won that trade personally as a Yankee fan. Let's talk about some of their stats, whether that be offense, starting pitching, or in the bullpen. The offense was good. 10th in OPS, 16th in home runs, second in stolen bases. But when we get to the needs portion, losing Willy Adames' power, that 30 plus home runs, we're going to need to add some power back into this lineup. The starting pitching staff was mediocre by the numbers. 17th in ERA, 21st in whip, 16th in strikeouts per nine, and then the bullpen was clearly elite. Second in ERA, third in whip. Let's get to the needs of this team. I wrote down third base, and then in parentheses, Ollie Dunn did rake in the minors.
Yeah.
But I'm sure we can add there. And then I wrote power in all exclamation points, power adding to the offense. And then in the winter meetings, they said they were in the market for a backup catcher, and they've also floated potentially trading away Rhys Hoskins. Right, he signed a multi-year deal. What did the Brewers do? They get the first year out of it, and then they say, hey, who's open to trading for Rhys Hoskins? And they also said that they will need a backup catcher. I'm not sure if I already said that,
Yeah,
but
you got that one.
I got that one. So how do you want to address third base? Because I think that's the first step of where we go here. Because I have an idea of doing it that is not trading for Alec Boehm, right? I don't know if the Brewers and the Phillies necessarily match up because when I'm seeing all of these Dave Dombrowski trade proposals for Alec Boehm, not only are they critically insane, but it's for a lot of major league talent. That's what I've been noticing. And I don't think that the Brewers are right now in the market trading major league talent. If anything, they'd be trading from their farm system, but I don't see that exactly happening. And when I look at the free agent possibilities for the Brewers, I'm not intrigued, right? We could bring back Brian Anderson for fun,
Yeah.
a nice little reunion, but I have a different idea. What if we move Sal Frelick to third base? He played some in spring training. He played 2 games last year, right? He's not your power guy, but then on the flip side, you get a power outfielder instead, which there are plenty of, and you can be, more unique in your process in getting one. They still have Blake Perkins in the outfield. Of course, they have Yelich, they have Garrett Mitchell, they have Jackson Chorio, and Sal Frelick. So they have a lot of outfielders. Would Sal Frelick move to third make sense for them, and then we go get a corner outfielder instead?
I don't think after they just got Caleb Durbin as well. So you have Oliver Dunn, you have Tyler Black, who's
Yep.
also playing both corners, and now you just got Caleb Durbin. Then you look at the outfield situation. Yelich is probably going to DH almost entirely. You got Mitchell in center, who hurt all the time. So you're hoping he's going to be healthy and available and look good when he was. Then Frelick in left. Perkins is a great fourth outfielder. But then after that, who's who's your other outfielder? I think Monasterio is also another guy that they'll probably have as just like a roving utility infield guy. I don't know if it's worth putting Frelick in this situation where he's
Hmm.
playing a position he hasn't played in a very long time, more than a couple games, and uh, yeah, I don't know if that would make sense.
Yeah, I guess the way I was looking at it is, all right, is it um is it Ortiz at short, or is it Ortiz at third, Terang at short, Durbin at second, and we just leave the infield at that? But I know that
I'm
they were planning on moving Ortiz to short anyway. Of course, they still have Terang, who's obviously a defensive wizard over there at second and can steal bases with the best of them. And Durbin's more of a second baseman, not really a third baseman. I know he can play some third. I don't know. I just felt that adding a power outfielder is the best way to inject power into this lineup. But then I thought to myself, well, how are we going to move things around here?
Do they care about power?
I mean, they just lost Adames like they should. If you look at their team right now, right, Yelich can supply some power, Contreras can supply some power, and you're
Chorio's going
hoping
to hit 30 this year, I think.
you're hoping that Hoskins can supply it again. I guess.
I think Chorio can hit 30. If Yelich is healthy, he can hit 30. Contreras has power. A healthy Garrett Mitchell has power when he hits it in the air, but he had 8 home runs in a limited sample this year. You hope Ortiz hits the ball in the air a little bit more, but he hits the ball hard. I think they could have enough power there overall. They're gonna be number one in baseball in stolen bases,
Yep.
like for sure. They're gonna manufacture a ton of runs that way. I think from a bat to ball perspective, they're as good as anybody. I think the only guys that are really like a strikeout risk, so to speak, on this team would be, like a Reese Hoskins if he's still on the team, and then Garrett Mitchell. I mean, you look at the rest of the ball club; it's a lot of bat to ball, a lot of just speed and grinding out ABs. I kind of like that. I mean, obviously, you'd love to add power, but I think it becomes a little experimental if you're moving Frelick to third when you already have other options there, and Frelick is kind of comfortable in left, and they're probably not going to spend any money in the corner outfield. So I think you could piece together third base. You basically have three different candidates, or a rotating door here of just Oliver Dunn, Tyler Black, Caleb Durbin, see who stands out the most. But I also think Oliver Dunn can play, man. Like, he was hurt a lot of last year, but this is a dude that really stood out in the fall league. They went out and traded for it. They traded a couple prospects for after he stood out in the fall league. Hits the ball hard, can motor. But even if they want to kind of platoon him or whatever, like, I feel like it's just the most Brewers thing ever to go into this year and just try those three guys out with Monasterio also as like a, break glass for emergency option too.
So you've torn down all my ideas, hurting my feelings in the process.
Yes.
You're basically saying that the answer is in-house.
I I just I can't picture them doing anything at third.
Yeah, I guess what I was thinking is there's so many solid options on the trade market and in the free agency market in a corner outfield. So if we were able to move Frelick to third in this hypothetical world that I'm creating for the Brewers, we could trade for Adolis Garcia. He's got 2 years left. I still think that's a good buy low option. Taylor Ward's name has been floated from the Los Angeles Angels as a legit option. Both of those guys supply some power. And if you don't want to go on the trade market, Max Kepler could also feel like a Milwaukee Brewer to me. So that's where I was thinking if we can move Frelick to third, sign one of those guys, lengthen the lineup a little bit, add even more power, inexpensive options, nothing crazy here. It would result in a few moves, but it's not like the Brewers never make moves, right? They just made the Devin Williams trade. I know that's trading away one of your stars for a couple of players, but they have signed Reese Hoskins in the past. They have spent a little bit of money, right? They did just win the division. It just feels to me like we have to do a little bit more than relying on just in-house guys. But I see your face over the Zoom right now. All the people on YouTube can see it too. It's tough.
It's
It's
it's the
tough.
it's the fucking Brewers.
I
Like
know.
like Adolis is $10 more million.
Yeah.
Um, Taylor Ward is 8, which
Yeah.
is a good
So
deal.
the
But
exact Zach dollar amounts, Taylor Ward's making 8.75 this year. Adolis is making about 9 this year.
And
Cheap,
then you're
sort of.
moving Frelick. I'm trying to see like
Come
Frelick's.
on, that's pretty cheap though. 9 million. The Orioles just gave the 35-year-old Japanese pitcher 13.
They gave Brett Gimble that too.
I know.
I'm looking at Sal's third base game logs.
I'm trying to help
Uh,
here. I'm trying to help Brewers Nation.
oh, look, I
All I'm
think
trying to
you're
do.
right. I
No,
think
Arm's
you're right.
not trying to help.
I
He's buying
know.
into Jack's propaganda.
I'm buying into the Brewers model, unfortunately.
Unfortunately, you're right.
Um, yeah, it is actually like he played spring training at third a little bit, and then they clearly banged that for a reason. I got to grind some of that video just see what it looked like, but
Yeah.
um, man, but also at the same time, like Frelick, dude, like I love him, one of my favorite dudes that we've had on the show,
Yeah,
but
the
like
numbers aren't great
the numbers aren't good at all,
at all. Yeah.
and like what I could also see is, Frelick being more of that, but Perkins is the fourth outfielder. What I could also see though is maybe going out to try to get like a cheaper corner outfield bat. Like I don't know. And also, did they address backup catcher with Eric Haas? Is that good? Are they good there now?
He did slug over 500 last year. It was in a very limited sample while striking out 40% of the time. His stats from last year are hilarious. He
These
crushed
are
it or
not.
just completely swung and miss.
That's
I
fine.
it could yeah, I mean, we can just hand them any backup catcher, or they could just stick with Eric Haas. I mean, I
Yeah.
think it's
Like,
fine, especially when you have William Contreras, who genuinely plays every day. But of course, Gary Sanchez did get a lot of run because they put Contreras in the DH hole, so it is an important position for them. But I think Haas is fine enough. If you already have it in house, I don't think it makes sense to go give another backup catcher a couple $1 million.
yeah, I agree with that. Just sign like a minor league free agent or something. And then I think Tyler Black is kind of that contingency plan to Frelick as well in the corner, where they had him playing more left at the end of the year. Um, he's a great runner. I don't know why he's not better in the outfield, but if Frelick isn't swinging it well, you have Tyler Black. They can go out there and play. Crazy enough, I almost can see them subtracting from this offense. Like I could see them trading Reese Hoskins
Yep.
and like eating a little bit of cash because there's so many teams desperate for first base help right now. And the reality is, like, if the Mets pony up and pay one of Alonso or Christian Walker, and then the Yankees pony up and pay the other, the only options now on the market are what? Carlos Santana, who's probably going to make north of $10 million,
He's the
and
best option of those three, by the way.
that's like in terms of value, might
Yeah.
not be wrong. And then the what Paul Goldschmidt, who somehow is going to command $10+ million as well. And
Won an MVP a couple years ago.
yeah, he did.
He
It
did.
feels like 10 years ago.
I know.
Like teams might end up being like open to the idea of taking on Hoskins and like half of the 22 million he's owed. And if you do that, you could clear up some money to what I think still needs to be addressed is the rotation. Like you're banking on Brandon Woodruff, who hasn't pitched in like 10 years, to be able to come back. And I think he's going to be good. I hope he's going to be good. He's super talented, but he's 32 off of like a lot of issues. And then Nestor Cortez is coming off this flexor thing. Tobias Myers broke out last year, but like he broke out, and threw a fair amount of innings relative to what we've kind of gotten used to seeing from him. And then you have Freddie Peralta. Like I think they very easily need another starting pitcher as well in the fold. Like I think the Rule 5 pick also tipped the cap a little bit, where like a team that identifies bullpen arms with the best of them took the most boring ground ball oriented upper 80s throwing left-hander in the Rule 5. I think it's just like a stash in the bullpen emergency arm, because I think they're a little worried about just what happens if one of these guys falters. Like Woodruff, what if he has a flare up again off of shoulder surgery? And Nestor again, like what if that flexor comes back and becomes an issue? And then you're banking on Aaron Savali? Like I guess he was fine, but like I don't know. I don't know if I want to bank on Aaron Savali.
So that was something I wanted to bring up. Aaron Savali is making about 10 million this year, then he's a free agent. I was almost thinking they might trade him, even though you're totally right that they still need to add starting pitching options. Maybe it's DL Hall that answer instead, but you almost want DL Hall as a contingency plan to what you're saying about Brandon Woodruff or any of these guys who are coming in who, don't have a long track record of eating a ton of innings like Savali somewhat does, but he costs money and he's a free agent soon and he could net you a decent package. That's why I almost think they're going to trade him too.
I think they'd be more likely to move Hoskins than
No, I agree
Savali.
with you. I agree with you. Hoskins is more likely. I could just totally see Savali being on the block as well.
Because if they move Hoskins, then you could put Black at first
Yep. Or Ollie Dunn.
or Don at first, and then you can either sign an interesting arm. I think Jose Quintana has needed to be a Brewer for a while.
You're so right. Like, what if they just did
Screen-
that instead? Right? What if they trade Aaron Savali and they feel like they can get a Quintana for cheaper, or they can bargain hunt even more?
Because you're still kind of like lateral moving, where I'm still
I
worried
know.
about Woodruff and Cortez, and now if one of them goes down, you still don't really have an arm to plug in. So I I almost think you dump Hoskins. The Giants, I'm sure, would be interested. I don't know what the price point would be, but
Wouldn't Lamont Wade be playing first for them this year?
he's barely been available.
Yeah.
I think they probably would be open to the idea of platooning them, or Hoskins is a guy that could DH, could play some first, just a solid bench bat as well. Reunite with Willie Adames over there, and then you probably have to eat a little bit of it. You can take Wilmer Flores and his 3.5 million back the other way, and that can be your other like platoon bench first base bat. And then you get a depth arm or something like that. You clear up, let's say $8-10 million, and then you can allocate that towards getting a Jose Quintana, which then the rotation from there, like it looks a little bit more solid, and he's a solid contingency plan. But that said, like somebody would have to get pushed out there. So maybe they just want to roll the dice with these five. And if an emergency happens, that's where they can go to the Rule 5 pick in Connor Thomas, or they can call up Logan Henderson or a Carlos Rodriguez or a Chad Patrick, who all were pretty good last year. They probably don't do shit in the rotation either. So I think maybe you just hold on to Hoskins, and with your point of the power, like Hoskins wasn't great last year, but he hit 26 homers. So at least at that point, like that was your team leader in homers, and you hope that another year removed from the ACL, he's still only 31. He's going to be 32. Like maybe he
Yeah.
can hit you 30 this year.
Yeah. I think we're just kind of at a stalemate here.
Do they do anything? Is essentially the question.
Because I see why they wouldn't. I mean, this team on paper is still pretty solid. I mean, they're going to be
What are
great.
some third base trades you like? There's nothing out there, right? It would have to be moving Frelick out from the outfield, right?
Yeah, I was looking, and I mean, Bohm makes a lot of sense. I just don't know who's going to get on the phone with Dombrowski and be able to make a deal with Bohm right now.
No, yeah,
It's just
not with what he's expecting.
It's as if he thinks he's Alex Anthopoulos trading Austin Riley.
Yeah,
We're just not in
it's
the same
wild.
boat here. We're not even on the same planet. Bohm is a good player, but you're not going to get other teams'
Mason
best
Miller?
young players. You're just not going to.
No.
So to say that the Brewers are going to talk to the Phillies and end up getting a deal done is just wishing for something that isn't going to happen.
Yeah, I agree with
I mean, I
that.
hope it does. That'd be awesome. That'd be the perfect person to put into this offense. But it's not going to happen.
No.
So that's why I'm trying to be creative here. How can we get a Bohm-like bat on this team without maybe he playing third base? That's why I had the ideas for Taylor Ward or Adolis Garcia, or potentially just signing a Max Kepler. But I think you're kind of right. I'm just trying here, and it doesn't
Yeah.
even make a ton of sense.
I
So
want to. I just I
want
try to
to.
talk myself into it, and I'm like,
Yeah.
there's just there's no way they're gonna do it.
Yeah.
There's no way.
And who
I
knows?
look at the lineup.
Maybe they
Oh.
trade Hoskins and Savali, and then they win the division again. I mean, it's entirely
Yeah.
possible, right?
It's just-
We're not shit talking the Brewers as if this is some disaster.
It's
They
just
have
how
good
they
players
operate.
throughout, and they're deep, and they're going to do all the little things really well. And that bullpen is still going to be great. And I still think that this rotation is going to be very solid.
Yeah.
They're probably
And-
going to win 85 games still, while trading away even potentially more pieces.
And what I always talk about with the fall league is it really is an audition for a lot of prospects for other teams as well. And what I think is interesting is that Caleb Durbin played more third base than any other position in the fall league.
Hmm?
And I almost feel like that was
Yeah.
that was almost a point for the Yankees for themselves as well, right? Because like they figured we know he can play second. But let's see if third base is also an option. But I think also knowing that other teams, other scouts know that he can play second. Let's see if he can play third. And he played third in center field and even filled in at short a little bit too. Um, that's even more so now with the acquisition of Durbin. I just feel like they're just going to roll with a done Durbin platoon with Black as the, kind of emergency there and also filling in left and filling in at first. And they're just going to say, hey, this is a fun, which it is, athletic, fast, scrappy lineup that is going to manufacture a lot of runs. And I think I said on the last episode, like I would bet a lot of money. I don't know if MGM has this, and maybe we can ask if they can make one for make a line for this. I think the Brewers are going to lead the league in stolen bases comfortably,
Yeah.
like comfortably.
This team is so fast.
So fast. So I think they just lean into that. But this might be the lamest playing GM segment ever because I don't know if they do a single freaking thing.
I don't know if they do a single thing either. I mean, they don't really need to. Like they can,
They're
but
good.
just as is, you're totally right on the stolen bases. I think this team has the possibility of being the best defensive team in Major League Baseball. And I think even without Devin Williams, it's going to be one of the better bullpens in Major League Baseball. You got Yoho coming up. You got Mizorowski coming up. Added to a pen with Trevor McGill, Jared Koenig, who I love, put up a 2.47 ERA last year, just a big old lefty, throws 95-mile-an-hour fastballs right down the dick and says, I dare you, and nobody's hitting it. You have Joel Payamps, who's coming off another solid season, but he can be better. Brian Hudson was out of this world, 173 in 62 innings. Elvis Peguero is still good, and they love Nick Mears, and deservedly so. Nick Mears came over from the Colorado Rockies, and we're watching him sit 100 with vert. And we're like, where the hell did this guy come from? Thank you for saving him from pitching on the moon.
Yeah,
It's a great move
seriously.
by them. And then if DL Hall becomes something that we expect him to be one day, they're going to lock down every game. They're going to beat you with defense, beat you with speed. They're going to win a lot of 3-2 games, and that'll be the end of it. And they might win the division.
Yep. Yep. So what minor league pitcher do you want to sign?
Well, you're the guy. You're Arb Scoops. All right. Actually, question: what's been your favorite? The people dropping the comments, atomic bombs. They're so. What's been your favorite so far?
Oh, I think Latonic Bomb might be the best one. It's just
Atomic
hilarious because
bombs.
they're all minor league signings too.
My
Um,
favorite. My favorite, I think, is your past one. Brian Servant agreed to a minor league deal with some team, and Johnny Chuta. No.
dude, there was a reply from like the account, like the name of the account was like, "Please sign Brian Servin." And he said, "Great signing." And I was like, "Oh yeah, really objective viewpoint here." Like, but that just shows you how vast social media is. Like, there's a Brian Servin fan account. Like, there's a guy who took time out of his day to go into his profile and change whatever his name was previously to sign Brian Servin. It's an incredible world out there.
It's a ball knower. Respect to
It is
that
a
person
bond.
out there. Whoever you are, respect.
Respect.
All right. You ready to play general manager for the Miami Marlins? I mean, we haven't made
What
any moves.
yeah, but it was a
We haven't
fun,
made anything.
fun conversation,
Yeah, it
fun thought
was.
exercise.
Yeah, it was fun. And I still think this team is going to be good. Right? When I talked about it at the beginning, let's try and make this as entertaining as possible with the Brewers and the Marlins. This is no disrespect to the Brewers. We just know how they operate, and
They're
their
good.
current team is totally fine. So what else are
I
we
love the
supposed to do
Nestor
here?
move. Like, obviously, you do too. And like
Yeah.
they addressed their two needs, not in
Yep.
the most exciting way possible. But that's what kind of fucked us for this episode was like that trade. Literally, like it was kind of boring in terms. I mean, Nestor's exciting, I think, but like they answered both of the spots that we had like circled.
Yeah.
Whether you love it or not, like they addressed it, and like that's makes it hard for us to then address it again. It becomes a little bit unrealistic. I'm gonna give you three names, and you tell me which one is signing a minor league deal with the Brewers. Jordan
This
Lyles.
could be a national game show. Like, guess
Jo-
that minor league signing for a chance to win $1 million.
let's see which one. Which one's the best one here? You tell me. Marco Gonzalez.
Ooh,
And they might be major league deal guys, so then we can't do it. Marco Gonzalez, uh, or Urquidy's probably getting a big league deal, right?
Is he?
Maybe not. Marco Gonzalez, Jose Urquidy, Carlos Carrasco,
Mm,
or, or Luis Patino.
the Mount Rushmore. I'm trying Patino. I'm just
Yeah,
gonna see if it's gonna work. I mean, that's who I'm
he's
trying.
still 25
Yeah,
somehow.
he seems
It's the
40.
most like NBA effect like age
Yeah.
like for a player in baseball I can remember in a while. I feels like he's 34.
And I do, don't you feel like if he signs with the Brewers, he's going to put up like a pretty good season?
I'd imagine it's his best shot. It's got to be
Yeah.
his best shot.
I think you go with Luis Patino, and he ends up being a decent four starter in the league somehow and win the division.
All right,
And
there we go.
and
We
then they make it past the next round because it's Trevor McGill instead of Devin Williams, and it was actually an upgrade for them. So then they
dang.
make it to the NLCS, and they beat the Dodgers at 6 because they outrun the Dodgers. Then they're in the World Series taking on the Royals.
Aaron Ashby shuts the door,
Aaron
and Major
Ashby
League
shuts the
Baseball
door. Milwaukee
has
Brewers are
yeah
champions for the first time in their history.
history. Yeah,
History.
I think that sounds good. Also, don't forget they already signed Anthony Siegler to a minor league deal.
He can
That was
throw with
broken
both
by just
arms.
baseball as well.
He can
He
throw with
throws
both
with both
arms.
arms. Yeah,
That was the
that's
worst
important.
pick I've ever seen. I remember watching that draft and audibly shouting at the television, Anthony Siegler to the Yankees. And then they're starting to show highlights of him, and it's just him juggling. It was legitimately on MLB Network. It was him juggling 3 baseballs. And I said, this is our first rounder?
That's the
Why?
combine. That's
Well,
part of the combine now. Can you juggle?
well, he could throw with both arms and he's a catcher.
Now
No.
he's a second baseman. They,
No,
they moved him to second.
is he a left-handed second baseman?
He's whatever he wants to be.
He's whatever he wants to be. Great. All right, we're off to a great start here. But before we get to the Miami Marlins, let's take a quick break. Playing general manager for the Miami Marlins, Aram Layton's Mona Lisa. Let's hashtag make it Miami, Aram. Did you like that
Um,
intro?
I like it. Yeah. So first move, pre pre-arb extension to Griffin Conine, 10 years, $185 million.
Why are you short selling him? 185, just round it up to 200 at that point. But let's go through the deals that they've made so far. They traded away fan favorite Jake Berger. No more Burgers in Miami. This kind of pissed me off, I'm not going to lie. In
Yeah, that one
exchange for
sucks.
infielder Max Acosta, starting pitcher Brian Mendoza, and infielder Echedri Vargas.
Is
And I
Shedry?
Echedri. So I
Mhm.
wrote down making room for Connor Norby question mark, and then I literally wrote in my notes, haha. What are we doing? What are we doing? I know you probably have some words on it. I know you guys have touched on it in a previous episode, but kind of made me sad. I mean, I get it, but the Marlins don't have any power, right? Jesus Sanchez right now is the leader in home runs in the clubhouse on this team, and he didn't even have 20 last year. This guy was a lot of fun. And you hear Miami Marlins fans talk about his family, right? And how much of a clubhouse legend he was. I get it, right? You got Norby there. And Norby was great for you guys in that limited sample when he came over in the Trevor Rogers trade, but didn't it piss you off?
It was just more like it was more disappointing just because, I think when you have they got another year of control too because he was like 4 days short of the cutoff. So you have 4 years of control of this guy, and I feel like when you look at the pitching too, and they're probably going to subtract anyway, so it's a moot point. But yeah, you could have made the case that you keep Berger, you sign a couple bats, and like this team could just shock you and just hit enough to hang around and hang around 500 and play some meaningful games down the stretch. I mean, if you look at a healthy rotation, especially if Yuri came back at the last half of the year of Sandy, Luzardo, Yuri at the end of the year, Braxton Garrett, like I know he was hurt all last year, but remember how good he was. Ryan Weathers was really solid last year. Like you have a lot of options there, and then Edward Cabrera is just even like whatever you get there. Um, you have finally an offensive-minded catcher and Agustin Ramirez coming up, and I know that he has some development to do catching wise, but like you had some pieces there where I think you could talk yourself into maybe this team can surprise, and if they don't, then you sell off at the deadline. But it just seems like that was never really in the Marlins' interest here, and it seems like they're pretty keen on just punting another season away. But I think the reality is of that, like, there's not as much gain as there used to be in having the worst record in Major League Baseball, and the Marlins just learned that the hard way, and now have the seventh pick in the 2025 draft. So from that lens, it's disappointing. And then I think also you're ushering in all these new young guys. It's good to have some sort of continuity in the clubhouse, especially because you do need to trade Luzardo at the deadline this year at the very least. He's probably going to end up getting moved, and we're going to move him before the season anyways. But like if you Luzardo's the other kind of clubhouse leader, who's the guy in this clubhouse now? It's a revolving door, and it's a lot of young guys, and I think there's a lot of value to having that clubhouse leader. I know Sandy Alcantara is that, but he's more of a lead by example guy. Again, I know Jake Berger was really a big part of what kept those guys together, and orchestrating like team events, things like that, and post game recaps, and everybody really enjoyed him. So I get it's a business, and they got three decent prospects for him. Really, I would say one and a half decent prospects for him. But yeah, I mean, it's not the worst return given that he's limited, to first base DH and was really kind of stretched thin at third. But 4 years is a long time for a guy that was clearly your best power hitter.
Yeah, limited defensively, I get it, but this guy is 28 years old and since 2023, 63 home runs. In that span, that's more than Bobby Witt Jr., Ketel Marte, Rafael Devers, Manny Machado, Teoscar Hernandez, Mookie Betts, Willie Adames, Austin Riley, Vladimir Guerrero Jr. This guy has a ton of power. He's still
Yeah,
young. I get it. He's limited defensively, and you got the prospect too. I just wish they got more, right? I
yeah.
wish this wasn't, I wish they weren't going for quantity of decent. At least get a fun prospect to put in the minds of Miami Marlins fans where it's like, oh, we want a one for one deal. This guy could be pretty interesting, right?
Yeah.
Focus on the best prospect available. What are we doing? Just getting a bunch of guys. It's like we hope one makes the majors.
Yeah, hopefully one of them's a good utility guy. Like that's the part that's frustrating me, and I agree with that. Especially like Maximo Acosta's I think the headliner there. I know some people like Vargas better. Just I trust me, I think Acosta's a full notch ahead. But like you're still hoping that he's kind of like a okay everyday middle infielder or a utility piece. And Jake Berger, like it was a lost first half, but remember banged up, even was slow out of the gate in spring training. And in the second half, he had a 143 WRC plus. Like I would have loved to have seen him carry that even just through the first half of this year. And if he's matching that, like
Trade him.
imagine what you could get for him there,
Yeah.
doing it again. And people talk about the WAR. Sure, the WAR is like low. It was what, half a win if you look at F4 last year, but that's because he was playing a lot of games at third and just not playing well there, which is just going to destroy the WAR. Any team that's acquiring him is not going to put him at third unless it's an emergency. It's going to be more first and DH, and at that point, I think it would be easier for him to accumulate WAR. So I loved it for the Rangers. I think
Yeah.
just gives them another wrinkle and does give them an emergency plan for Josh Young if he does get hurt, where you can plug Berger in there. But I also think gives them another option at first base with Nathaniel Lowe there, and just another option at DH if Adolis Garcia continues to struggle and things like that. So I love the move for the Rangers. And for the Marlins. Like, yeah, it does technically make the farm system marginally better, but I don't think it was worth it in the grand scheme when the return. Like again, like I love what you mentioned. If you got like a good piece back, then I get it.
Yeah.
But at this point, for the sake of just the franchise and just watchability,
Yeah.
I don't think the return was enough to justify just the optics of the move. But again, like the one thing I will give credit, and I don't know if that's really a compliment to Peter Bennings and co. They are very committed to the plan to the point where they don't give a shit about optics. And
Yeah.
sometimes you have to be that way. But I think you can also make exceptions. And when you're getting a return of a couple top, I would say between 20 to 30 ranked prospects in a system, like I might prioritize optics in that situation. But also the last thing before I forget, I think there was also a priority of getting Davis and De Los Santos at bats as well. And I get that because he hit 40 home runs last year between double and triple A. And like, there's no point in kind of just leaving him in triple A. But I also think he's going to get his doors blown off at the major league level with the approach challenges that he has. And not forever, but like next year, I think there's going to be a very steep learning curve.
Do you think he could have an Eric Haas kind of slash line, 40% K rate, slug 500?
And a 2% walk rate. Yes.
Yeah.
You know what's funny? I think if all goes right, his stat line will look very similar to Jake Berger. Like,
But if it's I don't even know though.
and that's what I'm saying. Like, I think his potential, like, you're hoping that he looks like Jake Berger. And that's what's even funnier to me is like, Jake Berger was still on the minimum. So,
Yeah.
like, it's really the only thing is just clearing up ABs, which I get. And then Augustine Ramirez is also coming along. And if he's not catching, that's a guy that you want playing some first base and DHing because the bat is good and it's better than I think he has more offensive upside, in terms of well-roundedness than both of them potentially. But I think this signified, hey, we want to get Davis and De Los Santos at bats, and they're going to do that. And I'm just saying, buckle up. Like, it's going to be a process with Davison. He was chasing like 50% of the time after the trade when I think it was made clear, like, hey, you need to chase less. So it may not be a choice. It may just be a result. So we'll see. We'll see how that all looks.
With all due respect, buckling up for the guy who's supposed to play DH next year with the bat, the guy who's only supposed to hit, and we have to buckle up.
Yeah.
I don't feel good. I mean, I think that's
Shouldn't.
fair. I don't feel good.
You
All right,
shouldn't at all.
let's go over some team stats from last year. The offense 26th in OPS, 27th in home runs, 13th in stolen bases. A little bit of speed here. A little bit of speed here. Starting pitching, 29th in ERA, 29th in WHIP, 27th in K per nine. But, they were all injured. So we'll get that back. Bullpen, 22nd in ERA, 16th in WHIP, 18th in strikeout per nine. I put needs as tear down.
Yeah, prospects.
Yeah, where are you at here?
I mean,
Do you agree with this plan? Like, if you're Peter Bendix and we're fully committing to the plan, do you think it's the right direction right now? Because I don't think we've ever asked you that. Like, you understand this is the plan. You understand that he's committing to it. Do you agree with the plan?
I do
Okay.
because this farm system was horrible. Um, the big league squad still left a ton to be desired offensively. Like, think about the pieces that they've traded away. Like, those are players that the hitters even like weren't really going to move the needle for them. And I mean, look at Brian De La Cruz, for example. Like, it's a guy that ended up getting non-tendered anyways. I think Jazz is the one guy that, like, okay, you would have loved to retain him, but at the same time, like, that's the one trade where I think you can look at the return and say, wow, they may have got their catcher of the future. They may have got the middle infielder as well. That could be huge for them, Jared Serna. And they were able to get another piece along with that. So I think it's the necessary evil. And we talked about it, like the Marlins over the last like 6, 7, 8 years. They are operate like a small market team, but then also try to like participate and like I would say actually they don't operate like the good small market teams.
Hmm.
They spend like a small market team, but also try to like cosplay as a middle market team, and you're just going to get outbid every single time.
Yeah.
Nobody really wants to play for you, even if you do match the bid. We saw that with a Brennan Drury, like who took less money to go play for the Angels. Like we saw it on multiple occasions because the Marlins hadn't really proven that they can be competitive. And I think you have to prove that you can develop and have your own waves of talent coming up, and they've never really been able to do that. And if you're a small market team that doesn't have any homegrown talent, you're going to be screwed because even
Yeah.
the big market teams have homegrown talent. We talk about the Astros, the Dodgers, like the teams that are perpetually competitive. Yes, they spend big in big spots, but they also have more homegrown talent than the Marlins do. So you're double screwed, and you're never going to be able to spend with them. So you might as well get solid at developing like they do, and that's how you can maybe hang around and be the Rays. And that's why I think the Marlins ultimately, I think that's why they hired Peter Bendix to take over. So I agree with it up to a certain point. I think you also have to draw a line, and it can't just always be the churn and burn and cash in on every asset. Like I think there has to be some feel for the fans and some feel for actually building a little bit of continuity with this team. And that's why I think you don't trade Sandy Alcantara going into this year. Maybe you move him at the deadline. I still think that's a guy that you should try to hold on to, especially if you get good returns for some of your other arms. But again, that they're inevitably going to trade him. So those are the spots where I would probably draw a line a little bit, but I don't think they will, and that might be where I differ slightly. I also would spend a little bit in certain spots, right? Like the Nationals go out and sign a Jesse Winker last year, like not the most exciting move in the world, but you know they turned him into a prospect, and I think that's an arm that actually may end up throwing innings for them this year. The Marlins almost don't even bother with that. Like they signed Tim Anderson by default for 5 mil just because like they had nobody.
Yeah.
And Tim Anderson had nowhere else to go, and they're like, "Here, take it." And he took it, and it was a bad signing. I get it, but like, I'd rather them try that more often than legitimately doing Zippo, and that's what they're going to do this offseason too.
So you mentioned Sandy getting traded, and you don't think that it's a good idea. And I kind of want to flesh that out a little bit because if we are committing to the plan, right, this Peter Bendix plan, Sandy does have a backloaded contract, right? He's got 3 more years, but in 2024 he's getting about 9.3 million. This year it's 17.3. Then again 17.3 in 2026. Then 21 million. And you said
Yeah.
that you think they will inevitably trade Sandy. Arm, is it now the time? I mean, I know
So
he's
you,
coming off the injury, so maybe you trade him then at the deadline. Maybe that is
yes.
actually the perfect time to do it. But damn,
So
damn.
you tell me, you see Sandy Alcantara make. I'm trying to think how many starts you make before the All-Star break, but let's say
15,
let's say he makes
16.
12.
Okay.
But just for the sake of argument, let's talk start getting going in July.
Yeah.
He makes 12 starts and he looks, I don't even like, just for the sake of like not making it too extreme of the best case scenario, let's say he looks like, I don't want to say 2.280 ERA,
Let's
Sandy.
say he's
But
supposed to do a 3-4.
let's say he looks like 2021 Sandy, which was a 3.2.
Okay, yeah.
And like, but he's cruising, going deep into starts, and he's throwing 99. He looks like himself again. How much more valuable is he going to be if you just see that than what you're presently looking at his value as right now? If you were the Yankees acquiring him or another team.
I think he's more valuable if I see those 12 starts.
Yeah, I think a lot of teams probably feel that way too,
Yeah.
right? So
But not
I
to say
think
he's not valuable now. Like he could still
no.
net you guys a good prospect return. That's why I wanted to ask the question. Do the
Hmm.
Marlins want to take that risk of letting those 12 starts come? Because maybe he doesn't look the same. Maybe after 12 starts, Arm, it's a 3.9, right? Maybe
Yeah.
it's 8.5 strikeouts per nine. Maybe the velocity is still there, but we've seen some shaky Sandy at times. And that defense isn't really going to do him much right behind him because he's a ground ball guy. So maybe a couple get through that they shouldn't, and maybe some underlying metrics look okay, but the production doesn't look great. And then you don't get enough for him. And then, of course, he's a starting pitcher. So what if he gets hurt again?
There's
So yes, if I'm a team looking at Sandy, I want to see those 12 starts. That would make him more valuable. But if you're the Marlins, you risk it. Instead of maybe you get a slightly lighter return than watching those 12 starts, but you're still going to get a pretty good return now. And then you get out from under that money that you never even have to pay him anyway.
Yeah, I think if you move him this year, yeah, I mean it's going to be expensive for sure for them. Like
Yeah.
they're going to have to pay half of that, right? So I mean he's such a bargain though. Teams will be lining
Oh,
up, if
yeah.
he's throwing well. I think that's part of it too. Is I think teams it is a great bargain because let's assume that you're picking up the $21 million option. So that's 34.6 plus 21. So it's 50, 55, close to $56 million, right? So like if you include the trade assignment bonus and all some of the like other stuff as well. You're getting Sandy for 3 years, 56. Like that's a great deal
Great
if
deal.
he looks anything like Sandy. But like if you have a little bit of apprehension, just because it's like, oh, let's see what he looks like first. 56 million when you don't fully know what he looks like just yet may be a little bit of a concern for teams. So like I'm with you. I think if you're the Marlins, you have to roll the dice there because like this team has been so stuck.
Yeah.
And this is a gamble that I think you take because one, I'm just going to bet on Sandy Alcantara and his work ethic any day of the week,
Yeah,
and that he's going to come
that's a
back from
great
this thing
point that I was going to add that
stronger than
this
yeah.
isn't we aren't looking at a regular
This
pitcher.
ain't Sixto Sanchez.
Yes, this guy, if you were to trust anyone to kind of bounce back from an injury like this and come out just working incredibly hard and being the guy who was the unanimous Cy Young a couple years ago, wasn't he
Yep.
unanimous?
Yep. Younes.
I'm going to trust that. I think if I'm the Marlins, and I am going to wait until the deadline because you never know at the deadline there could be a more desperate team out there. Because right now, if I am a team, do I trade for Sandy? We're going to talk about Jesus Luzardo. There's still other arms that you can trade for. You can also sign Jack Flaherty. You could get the big fish in Corbin Burns. There's still plenty of pitchers that will sign 1 year deals that can end up slotting into the back end of your
Exactly.
rotation. So, does it make sense for a team to give the Marlins a big time package when you're taking the risk as then the team now trading for him? Or you'd rather wait those 12 starts, see what you got here, and then who knows, they might even get a bigger package, even though there's less control on the contract because, of course, he's pitched a half season, but you feel better about the remaining 2.5 years anyway.
And you're still getting three pennant runs, right? And like that
Exactly.
keeps lingering in my mind when I think about the Phillies and there are conversations with Crochet and why they were a little bit apprehensive to up their offer this offseason until they finally did at the last minute. But because of the fact that they were very keen on acquiring Crochet for the title run last year,
Yeah.
once they couldn't do that, the value in their mind dipped a little bit. So I think that's ultimately the big one. And unfortunately, I hate to say it, but it's speaking of things that are inevitable. Pitchers are going to go down this year,
Yeah, they are.
and when that happens, teams are going to be desperate and they're going to be hungry to go get another arm. So I'm with you. I think with all of the options on the market too, it kind of works against the Marlins in this present moment. That's why I think Luzardo too, the return that they're going to get for him, I think can make them a little bit more patient with Sandy and say, hey, we just got a bunch of prospects back. Let's wait and see what we can get for Sandy as well. And the reality is this is going to probably be a top two, three farm system in baseball. We've done this sequence before, right? The Marlins did have that way back. You hope
Yeah.
that this front office scouts a little bit better and doesn't have prospects that end up playing, wide receiver for Arkansas a few years later.
Oh, uh, that just completely lost my train of thought. I was about to go into Jesus Luzardo, and then you just bring up the Arkansas wide receiver. And I don't know. I'm not a good enough podcaster to hold my own in transition there without laughing. That's not my skill level yet. That was too funny. So I want to talk about Jesus Luzardo clearly. Don't you kind of feel the same way? He's coming off 66 innings, 5.00 ERA. Underlying metrics weren't great. Strikeout per nine dropped from 10.48 in 2023 to 7.83. Are we kind of
Yeah.
feeling the same thing? Why trade him now? Because I'm hearing
Yeah.
the Cubs, right? Casey is not on the table. James Triantos,
Eh, Yeah.
and
So
then lesser for Lazard. No, no, no. I'm not doing that if I'm the Marlins. I'm just not.
really,
I need
you're
more.
not, you'd
I need
rather
more.
hold?
Yeah, I'd rather hold. I'm seeing what I got here because, again, I believe in Luzardo having a good front half. I do,
Yeah.
which I think is going to up his market. But then you are the Marlins, so you now have two guys in the same scenario. Now, with two on the market, does it almost diminish both of them in a way? Ugh, I don't
It,
envy
that
Peter Bendix.
Yeah, that is a headache. I didn't even really think about having both of them on the market at the same
Yeah,
time too. Well, and also like you mentioned both, like I almost sometimes part of me wants to like split the difference and say, okay, I'm gonna like cash in on one and then roll the dice on the other instead of rolling the dice on both. And this has nothing to do with work ethic. Jesus Luzardo is also,
dog.
a guy that I mean, given all the injuries that he's dealt with, I think a lot of pitchers would not even, have had the seasons that he has had and the season that he had in 2023. Like he works his butt off to get himself to be available. But I think you look at the health issues and like a back issue at the end of last year that sidelined him. Like I think there's a lot more risk to Luzardo being available than a Sandy, even, right? Like Sandy, we're talking about just more like a traditional TJ come back. Like he's been pretty durable and fine other than that. Like Luzardo, it's been a litany of stuff. So like, do you just cash in? But to your point, I think you can kind of stand in a position where it's like we don't have to move him. We
27.
will,
He's 27 years old.
yeah, we'll sit at our price, and if you don't meet it, like we'll go into the year with him and see how things go. But I ultimately think you have to bend a little bit if you also plan on, holding on to Sandy, which I think they're going to do, because it's also 2 years of Luzardo, and that quickly turns into 1.5 if you move him.
Yeah.
So that's the one thing versus like Sandy, right? It's still, 2.5. Uh, that's my only thing, and I do think the Cubs are ultimately going to pony up enough. It may not be Owen Casey, but what I had going was at least they go Kevin Alcantara, which is just classic because I've never really liked him as a prospect. So naturally, I think he would be the headliner. And then Jefferson Rojas, who I do really like. So you'd be getting two instead of getting the one headliner, you're getting two, solid prospects, and then Drew Gray as a throw-in for Luzardo and Jesus Tinoco, who's just another guy that can just plug into their bullpen and can be solid. I think it would be hard for the Marlins to pass on that because Alcantara would be probably your opening day center fielder. Jefferson Rojas is, I think, easily their best middle infield prospect at that point. And then Drew Gray is a lefty with big whiff stuff that can't throw strikes and might as well take a shot as a third piece.
Just to make me giggle one more time, can you, instead of Jefferson Rojas, can you pick a Cubs prospect that's adjacent to him that you don't like that you think that will end up being in the trade anyway?
Just in case,
Yeah.
just so it's on record.
Just so it's on record. And if we see it come through, I just get another laugh when Passan says Jesus Luzardo has been traded for Arm Layton's three least favorite prospects in the Cubs system.
Like I like Triantos as a prospect, like overall, but I would hate the fit. Like he contact oriented
Yeah,
second
that
baseman.
ballpark.
Yeah, and they have so many of those types already. I would like if they went Triantos and Alcantara and called it a day. Like it's a good return, but I'd be like, dude, like that's an interesting one. Yeah, I like Alcantara. The upside would be too hard to pass up on, and I know that like Peter Bendix would love the EVs and the defensive ability in center field, which is plus. Um, I think that would be a hard one to pass up on, and I think if you're able to get Jefferson Rojas as the second piece, like for us, Jefferson Rojas, like at just baseball is a top 100 prospect, so he would actually be the quote unquote headliner. I don't know how the Cubs value them internally, but um, I think that would make it very much worth considering if you're the Marlins, where you're getting clear cut center fielder for you that's big league ready ish now, put up good numbers in AAA. You're getting a middle infield prospect who, again, I think would be one of your better and still very, very young. And then you get another arm in the fold as well that you hope you can develop a little bit more and see where he can, where he can go.
Can the Orioles please trade for Luzardo? I mean, come on. They already have been on the phone with each other with the Trevor Rogers trade. They know each other's systems. Michael Eyes apparently never gets on the phone anyway, so that's one guy that he has at least been in contact with. And when I look at the Orioles rotation, I know they just got signed the guy from Japan, I understand. But if I'm looking at the rotation, again, the only lefty is Trevor Rogers, and I just don't know how we can rely on Trevor Rogers this year. You bring in Luzardo right now. I think they could even give you a better package. And the
Could they?
Cubs, I mean, how many lefties do you need? It's just adding another good arm to the fold. I totally understand why the Cubs would do it. But I mean, the Orioles, please, please, Orioles.
Well, and the
Let's
Orioles
make a
had a.
trade for the Orioles, even though it's
I,
not going to happen. It won't, but let's try for
I
fun.
would love it. I would love it. But and the Orioles and the Marlins, I think, from what I understand, like exchanged some pretty serious offers for Luzardo
Christmas cards.
early, like yeah, like around this time or a little bit like closer to spring training last year. Even like some intriguing, one for one swaps potentially, like a high end prospect one for one swap. But I think ultimately didn't happen. And now I just think Orioles system worse, Luzardo's value lesser. Can they still meet in the middle here and make something happen? Maybe. But Michael Elias, who is like king prospect hugger kind of, uh, now that his system is diminished, does he hug the prospects more or less? Because like I do think I agree with you. Like if they're willing to do it, a Bradfield headlining a deal, South Florida kid, who I mean the floor is so freaking high. He's
Yeah.
be a potential 80 defender in center field. Um,
Real quick, would the Marlins want a Mountcastle or an O'Hearn? Would they want any of this major league talent?
I don't think so.
I
I
don't
don't
think
think so,
so
especially
either.
with
But
the
I know the
AVs that they wanted
Orioles
to
would
clear up.
love to trade
Oh,
one of
they would
these
love
big
it.
league
Maybe a
bats.
three team trade, could make sense, and then Marlins get, a middle prospect, kind of mid tier prospect coming over, and then O'Hearn goes to a third team or whatever. But like Bradfield, I feel like would
Perfect.
be a huge, huge, huge get for the Marlins, and I know it would be somebody that they would love to add to the fold. I
Bradfield
just
and McDermott.
McDermott would be fun too. A great, one of my favorite guests that we had last year on the call up as well. McDermott's the man. Um,
It's so funny. We've interviewed Jesus Luzardo, and that was a great interview. Uh, but it's like Chase McDermott, though.
uh, yeah, it's true. Luzardo is the man too.
Luzardo's
After
the
the
man.
trade, I want to get him on, if
Yeah,
assuming he gets moved. I know like he's another Luzardo, South Florida kid. I know he loves being a Marlin, but like I
I
know
love.
he also would
Yeah,
love to compete.
the only reason I was bringing that up is I freaking love that Jesus Luzardo interview.
Oh, he's the
I
man.
just love his mindset too about pitching and the way he was
He's a
breaking stuff down.
grinder.
Yeah,
That's why I'm excited for him to pitch meaningful games, presumably elsewhere. Um, yeah, I mean, I think a Bradfield. I'm looking at like Griffo Farrell,
they
who they
want more
just
offensive
drafted.
pieces. They're trading
Yeah,
away a pitcher, maybe getting a pitcher in return. That's what I was thinking.
Bradfield, Trace Bright is also really solid. I think they probably want a guy that's a little bit further off. Like McDermott's big league ready right now. So like I don't know if they need that necessarily, especially because they're gonna have Mazer who needs to throw some innings, stuff like that. So like a Bradfield and a Trace Bright and like a Flyer is pretty tough to pass on as well. Like I Bradfield, yeah, I would go like Bradfield, O'Farrell, and Bright. It's a pretty good package.
Is that better than the Cubs package?
It depends on what you think of Kevin Alcantara. I'm biased, so like in terms of I just never really been a huge fan there. So like I would rather have Enrique Bradfield, but the crazy thing is Kevin Alcantara is a younger than Enrique Bradfield
Yeah.
and is a good defender in center field. And then, I think Jefferson Rojas is better than O'Farrell by a good margin, but then Trace Bright's a lot better than the pitching prospect added, and O'Farrell is still a solid piece. So it's comparable for sure. But I think the Cubs package has a little bit more like punch to it.
I think I agree
And,
with you. I think
and the
it,
Cubs system still is elite after they do
yeah.
that. Whereas,
And
I
also, I
mean,
think it's more likely anyway. Like, I don't think the Orioles are going to end up doing this trade. So,
who's another team that you think could swoop in here? I think the Red Sox make so much sense, but like, do they
yeah, they're
do
going to do
that?
another one.
Yeah, that's the
Um,
thing. I think they're going to spend at that point. That's a good point. Like, why would they deplete the farm system more when they have so much money to spend with how cheap Crochet is this year?
I don't really see a ton of other teams getting involved here. Like, I'm looking at the American League Central, not the Guardians. I doubt the Royals are going to do it. Tigers are somewhat interesting because I know that they've been in the market for some starting pitching, and they definitely need it. And they clearly proven they're a playoff team. So,
Yeah.
and they're seeing the window open with their, offensive pieces. And I know that they, Jackson Jobe, of course, is going to take a spot in that rotation. And I know they could fill it right with an Alex Cobb or something, but a trade for Luzardo may make sense. But I'm just looking at the rest of the board, right? It's not going to be the Brewers. It's not going to be the Cardinals, right? It could be the Cubs. It won't be the other teams in the Central. I think the National League West, like I'd love to say that the Padres would get involved, but if they're talking about trading Cease, that doesn't make me
Yeah.
think that they're going to go get Jesus Luzardo. D-backs are pretty much settled. Dodgers, I mean, they have a million starting pitchers and they're all elite. It's not the Rays. I don't think the Blue Jays are going to be involved here. So the Tigers would be my next best guess, and I don't
Yeah.
even see that either. I think it's Cubs or bust here, or
Yeah.
keep them.
I agree. And I think that's why I think ultimately a deal gets done because the Cubs, by all reports, really want it to get done. The Marlins like do have the leverage of at least, hey, we'll hold on to him, but I'm sure they'd rather not
Yeah.
and not risk it. So yeah, I think they match up on a deal here, and again the Marlins address center field tomorrow, and then also get some system depth.
All right, let's send it in. We just
All
traded
right.
Jesus Luzardo away. Damn
Yep.
it. I mean, it's kind of sad. I mean,
It is
great
sad.
guy, Miami guy. He's from the area. It's
I'm
sucks.
sure he will be happy to pitch some meaningful games. But yeah, I mean that does suck that you have a chance to play for your childhood team and they go full rebuild right
One
after
la-
you throw in a playoff game. So
one last move that I just thought of. I don't think it's going to happen. He hasn't even been floated, but if we're on Peter Bendix's plan of tearing this thing down, I thought Braxton Garrett could actually net the Marlins a decent package. Tons of years of control, very, very cheap. has kind of been the unsung hero of this Marlins rotation, right? You
Hmm.
think about Sandy, you think about Jesus Luzardo, of course, the allure of Yuri Perez, one of the best pitching prospects in baseball. When he came up, he was otherworldly as a 20-year-old or however old he is now. Edward Cabrera is exciting, right? Because he's either going to dominate or look like the worst pitcher alive.
Correct.
The Sixto Sanchez legend. And then Braxton Garrett's just been throwing 150 innings in this rotation to like a mid to high threes.
Yep.
And just nobody kind of ever talks about him. So I was just thinking I don't know who it would be. Maybe that's more Orioles adjacent, right? Getting a guy like that. I thought about if we are really committing to the bit here, would Braxton be available?
I think he would be. It's just the thing is, I think he's going to need to show that he's healthy too,
True.
which sucks. But
Again,
I'm with you. Like he is the unsung hero, and like he's been steady as could be through the half of 2023, all of 20, or excuse me, all of 2023, half of 2022, and then 2024 was just a lost year
yeah,
for
just
him
got
health
hurt.
wise.
Yeah.
But I think the second he looks good, I think he's also gone too.
Yeah.
So I think you're going to move potentially Braxton during the season, Sandy during the season, and then I would even consider Weathers if I were them. But you need some warm bodies there.
Yeah, you
Like
need starting pitchers on the team.
you do.
Like,
We
yeah.
saw what happened when you don't last year when they were all hurt. And Edward could be a guy that they cash in on if he looks good. He looked really good at the end of the year. It could be a
I'd
guy that
cash.
they cash in on as well. So like
I'd cash on him immediately as
I
soon
would the
as he looks
second I
pretty
could.
good. I'm trading him
Yes.
before the deadline. It's May. Anyone need him? He's got
Yep.
5 good starts.
Look at those 5 starts. I promise you, he figured it out.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I think they're going to end up holding on to those guys and moving them come like, you know, June, July, and could get a haul, but makes sense to wait. But I'm with you. Like, I think a lot of teams could use a Braxton Garrett who fills up the zone and has been so consistent when he's on the mound. So I think he's probably the next guy to go. And like it's Sandy and him, I think are the next guys to go for sure.
Anything else? What else would you do for this team? I feel like we're
Aside
rounding it
from
out now.
giving Conine the supermax.
Yeah.
I would consider trading Jesus Sanchez, but clearly like Bendix is enamored by his EVs and like thinks that it's now after 1,000 plate appearances, it's magically going to happen where he's going to hit 20 home runs. Like I've never seen a guy hit the ball harder and hit less home runs in my entire life.
Yeah, but
Um,
there's always that one home run a year that goes 525
and
feet.
it's always in Atlanta, by the way. And then it's like, whoa, and then he doesn't do it again. I might as well just maybe his second half was pretty solid. Might as well just see, but that's another guy I would happily move. I think at the deadline. But yeah, like they're not going to trade really anybody else. Like the whole lineup is either young or like has no trade value. And then the bullpen, you might as well wait, right? The only guy
Yeah.
that I would consider is Calvin Fauché. Like he had a nice year.
I'm just
And
waiting.
I would wait. Like all of these relievers were phenomenal in the second half. And then Andrew Nardi, if he's anything like he was in 2023, that guy could get you a haul as well. So I think you're just waiting on a lot of these guys.
Fun.
Yay.
Yay.
What a
All right,
time
well,
to be a Marlins fan in Miami.
what a time to be a Miami Marlins fan. So hopefully everybody enjoyed this episode of the Just Baseball Show. Marlins, Brewers, Orioles signing a pitcher on a 1-year deal, an absolute banger of an episode. And if you enjoyed, leaving a written review again on Spotify, Apple Podcast, rating 5 stars, the best way to support without spending a dime, as well as hitting the like button and subscribe button on YouTube. Big ask for the listeners of the Just Baseball Show. It's not really a big ask. It's just really important to us. The newsletter, signing up for the newsletter. It's absolutely free. You get it delivered to your inbox whenever a big move, happens. You get all the details. Free newsletter. Make sure to sign up. You can find the link in the episode description. We're putting a lot of man hours into this newsletter. We really appreciate, all the listeners, especially if you're listening to this show. That means you're a diehard, which means you are going to love the newsletter. Make sure to sign up down below. We'll be back on Friday. Arm, you got anything else before we say goodbye?
No, I just for Marlins fans that I know are probably tuning into this just because I know we got a little core of Marlins folks. The one thing I will say is it looks a little depressing when you deplete the rotation, but I also think that there's some excitement there in terms of like if you get a ton of offensive prospects coming in and continue to bolster the system, like on the way pitching wise is somewhat exciting. Like you'll see what Adam Major can do and if he can grab onto a late rotation spot. but you also have Robbie Snelling, who looked
Yeah.
phenomenal after the trade and finished the year in AAA. He could be, up sooner rather than later. Thomas White, who is the team's top prospect right now, left-handed pitching prospects who look great, in the minor leagues last year, could be a guy that's is up by the end of the year. And like those are two lefties that you should be very excited about if the Marlins are subtracting two lefties. And I assume that they're going to have even more on the way from a prospect perspective. So you can kind of see the vision a little bit more, and all of a sudden you can dream on a rotation of Yuri, Ryan Weathers, Thomas White, Robbie Snelling, and you can't count on all of them to work
What
out.
about what
But
about Noble Meyer?
Noble Meyer, yeah, he didn't have the best year ever, but still super talented, super raw.
Super young.
And then you hope some of these bats come up, but like you have at least more intriguing bats than you've had in the past. I can see the vision, right? You can see it. It's still far apart, but you can see these pieces coming together a little bit. Like this is going to be a test to see if the development has changed at all, and we'll just have to find out.
We will. And of course, we'll be back on Friday for Arm Laden. I'm Peter Apple again. Hopefully, everyone enjoyed. And with that, thank you, everybody.